Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and supporting. My name is Miguel Almeida. I am part of the Objectivism Portugal group. In conjunction with the Atlas campus, we have organized these conferences. We organized one in Porto last Tuesday, and we are organizing this one now in Lisbon today. The conference will be about the morality of capitalism. And we want to answer the following question. If capitalism is moral, why doesn't the right defend it properly? And to do that, we are going to count with the help of these three gentlemen. The first person I will introduce to you is the chairman of the Ayn Rand Institute. He is the author of Equal is Unfair, Free Market Revolution, and In Pursuit of Wealth. He also hosts his own podcast. It's called the Yaron Brook Show. And if you like what you hear today, you can just check it out. And so please just put your hands together for Yaron Brook. Thank you so much for being here. The next person I'm introducing here today is someone that I could stay here for the whole night talking about his accomplishments, but I'll just say this. He has a PhD in economics. He's done a lot of things. He is someone that we all, Portuguese society, we all should be very grateful for him pushing liberal ideas in the European sense in Portugal. And he's just published another book called Liberalismo, a 𝙏𝙗𝙕𝙏𝙗𝙕 𝙤𝙗𝙕 𝙤𝙗𝙕. And please just put your hands together for Carlos Guimarães Pinto. And the next person I'm going to introduce here today is someone that you all know for sure. He has a PhD in political science. He's a professor, he's a political commentator and analyst on primetime TV. He's someone that I admire for his bravery and intellectual capability. And he just published his book he's written many books, but he just published his last book called 𝙏𝙗𝙕𝙏𝙗 𝙈𝙤𝙕. And please put your hands together for Miguel Morgado. And to help us moderate this discussion, we have here today someone that at a very young age has already done a lot. So I'm very proud to introduce someone that is an investigator at IAP, in political science, and basically has written a book already. It was published in 2023. It's called Mikhail Gorbachev, O Fim do Império Soviético. And she's a writer at Expresso and a commentator and analyst at Now's New and Observador for international politics. So put your hands together for Daniela Nunes. Thank you so much. And the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miguel, can you hear me? Is that fine? Okay. Good evening, everyone. And just before we start, I have prepared some welcoming words to you. So welcome to our conference on the morality of capitalism here at the beautiful Tivoli Avenida da Liberdade. It's really a pleasure to me to see such a full room, full of people who feel curious, thoughtful, and probably ready to engage in new ideas and ideas that truly matter for all of us. As you probably know, tonight's event is actually part of the Road to Ayn Rand Conference 2026, bringing some of today's leading voices on individual liberty and capitalism closer to audiences here in Portugal. And our goal is actually very, very simple. It's to spark meaningful discussion, to challenge assumptions, and to leave each of us with something to think about right after this session. So thank you all for being here, whether you're a long-time admirer of Ayn Rand's ideas or just curious to hear new perspectives. You're in the right place either way. So thank you very much. Miguel, you have already done part of the job, so let me just say that we're very fortunate to have such a distinguished panel of speakers with us. The first one, of course, Yaron Brook, who is an economist and chairman of the Ayn Rand Institute. As you already know, he's one of the most well-known advocates for capitalism as a moral system and not just as an efficient one. And his talks challenge us to rethink the principles that underline freedom, success, and also human flourishing. And joining him, we have another two well-known Portuguese voices in political and economic thought, Miguel Morgado and Carlos Guimarães Pinto. As you know as well, Miguel Morgado was a member of the Portuguese Parliament from 2015 to 2019 and served as senior political advisor to the Prime Minister from 2011 to 2015. He's also a senior fellow at the Institute for Political Studies, from where I came from as well, and from where he holds a PhD in political science too, as well as a familiar face to all those who watch SIC Notícias. Carlos Guimarães Pinto is a member of the Portuguese Parliament. He has served as president of Iniciativa Liberal from 2018 to 2019, as well as executive director of Instituto Mais Liberdade. He has also holds also a PhD in economics from Universidade do Porto. So please join me in welcoming our guests. Thank you very much. Well, we're going to get started, and my first question goes right to Miguel, and is actually a very simple one. So Miguel, in a sentence, and please, in a sentence, what is capitalism?
It's a novel way of organizing production and consumption of goods. It's the modern economic form par excellence, without any historical precedent.
Okay, Carlos, anything to add to this definition?
No, I disagree completely with this definition. I don't think it's a novel way whatsoever. I think it's the way that people have lived for centuries and millennia. We just decided in the 19th century to call reality capitalism. But I cannot explain that in one sentence. If I have more time to explain it, I'll do it after.
You will, for sure.
Why I think capitalism is just normal life, and we just decided to call it that recently.
Okay, Yaron, you definitely have something to add.
Yes,
Don't
I'll
you?
disagree with both of you. I think capitalism is an innovation. It's an innovation that is a consequence of the discovery of the concept of individual rights. It is the system, political, social, economic system, that recognizes individual rights and where the government's sole responsibility, only responsibility, is the protection of those rights, and where all property is privately owned. It's an unknown ideal.
Okay, so you in a few words, you have mentioned individual responsibility, property rights, and I'd like to ask you, why is that such a crucial, fundamental part of your definition of capitalism? Why does it matter that much?
Well, I think something changed in the beginning of the 19th century. Something fundamentally changed. People call it the Industrial Revolution, but it's more than that, because it was political, it was social, it was cultural. And since then, we've seen this hockey stick phenomena. We've seen wealth grow exponentially at a rate and in a way that we haven't experienced in 100,000 years or more of human history. So something unique changed. And if you look at what that is, it really, I think, is symbolized by the founding of America. It's symbolized by this idea that individuals are ends in themselves. They have rights. The government should stay out of their lives other than to protect those rights, and property is essential for life. The fundamental right, there's only one right, really. Of all the rights, there's only one, and that is the right to life. And then property is a manifestation of that right. You can't have a right to life if you don't have a right to the stuff that you create, that you make. So you observe that this recognition of rights happens. People are left free for the first time in human history. They're left free to pursue their own lives. There's a recognition that reason is efficacious and powerful, and oh wow, all right. Unexpected, all right. Yeah, I guess with this size of a group, yeah, absolutely.
They
So
didn't
each
throw
one.
paint at you. You should consider yourself lucky. They didn't throw anything at you.
Oh no, I've
green
had a
paint
lot
and,
worse,
that's,
believe me, a lot worse. She didn't have her face covered and she didn't
Oh,
rush the
that's
stage, so we didn't get Antifa here. Oh.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
it's not time for
Alright.
questions from the audience, okay? Please. It's not the time for questions from the audience. It's not the time for questions from the audience.
Oh, so there we go. Okay. So,
Shall we keep
yes.
going?
You There's going to be more, I think. All right, we'll see. All right,
Let's
so
move on.
so individual rights. People are liberated. They're free. They have an opportunity to pursue their own values, their own goals, free of coercion, free of force. Suddenly, in the early part of the 19th century, late part of the 18th century, in some parts of Europe and the United States, and what you get is the manifestation of this freedom is a boost of entrepreneurial activity, business activity, wealth creation. And we call that capitalism. Marx looked around. I mean, Marx, to a large extent, helped define this term, but he looked around and what he saw was real. And he actually describes it pretty well. I mean, to Marx's credit, which is different than a lot of the Marxists today, he recognized what's going on around him, and he sees the wealth being created and the rising standard of living. He misinterprets it, and he believes it's going to lead to all these horrors, but he sees something real, and he called it capitalism. Okay, we're quite happy to take that term. Capital comes from head, which means mind, think, from Latin, and therefore not a bad term. So capitalism is the term describing this phenomena, explosion of productivity as a consequence of freedom.
Okay, thank you. So I presume we...
The door is over there. I'm not going to respond. Not the topic. Another time, another place.
You're a Zionist. You're equal to a Nazi.
Shall we keep going? Okay. As I was saying, I presume we need the state, first of all, to exist and then to develop some part of the work. So, Miguel, what work or in what sectors should the government be involved when it comes to a capitalist society? In your view, of course.
Capitalism has been evolving for a long time and adjusting to different social needs. I mean, there's this big argument since the late 19th century among liberals about what the state should do in order to make effective the protection of human rights, of individual rights. And some of the liberals actually came to the conclusion that the state had a lot of things to do, had a lot of responsibilities that it had to take. For instance, make sure that no one is miserably poor, make sure that no one works for a miserable wage, make sure that people have access to healthcare or to education.
Mm-hmm.
So, I disagree deeply with Yaron because he makes capitalism a social system, while in fact it is not. capitalism only makes sense since that moment in time when in Western consciousness we started to think that we live in different dimensions, political dimension on one side, a social dimension on the other side, but an economic dimension on the other. It's all a fiction, as we all know. We are not economic beings or political beings, we are total beings. But anyway, we started to think of ourselves as partaking of all these dimensions. And capitalism describes one way, one historical novel, absolutely novel, without precedent in history, of organizing our so-called economic life. But then again, what sort of economic life is adjusted to the liberal ideal, which is that everyone is free, that it leaves a kind of freedom in which equality is agreed. So at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, a lot of people started to think, well, liberalism is supposedly about the emancipation of every single individual. And for that task, we need the power of the state. We need to tax the rich, get a lot of fiscal resources, and distribute wealth. And even if some sort of goods, of economic goods, are not available in the amount that we want, then the state should assume that responsibility as well, and so on and so forth. So even in the family of liberals from the 19th century onwards, there's this big row, this big discussion, this big argument, even a fracture within the liberal family. That's perhaps some of the liberal/capitalist tenets, that is the sanctity of the right of property, the sanctity of freedom of contract, should actually be conditioned or limited. And that's why we have the current state of politics in the West. We are all, in one sense or the other, liberals, because we all want a society in which everyone is free. So in that sense, liberalism won. But there's this division between the left and the right, because the liberals have themselves divided around this question. Is it true that only the freedom to act as economic being without any political or state restraints lead to this emancipation of each individual? Or, on the contrary, we need the state to emancipate each and every one of us, at least the poorest of us, the most vulnerable of us in society? So this is an argument, a row within the liberal family.
Carlos, can you tell us then what's the difference between the capitalist society that Miguel was describing and a socialist society?
I'll start by saying why I was teasing earlier on about capitalism. And I think it's important to speak about this. I think capitalism is in the human nature itself. We always wanted to work, we always wanted to save, we always wanted to trade. So that was always part of the human being. What we call the emergence of capitalism in the 19th century, it's basically the creation of the institutional setting that allowed human beings that already were capitalistic in the sense that they wanted to work, they wanted to trade, they wanted to invest. That has always happened. I have a friend that is somewhere there that is telling that that capitalism was the word that was actually created in 19th century by anti-capitalists to describe the world as it is. So they found out, because there's always problems with the world, they identified a few issues that the world had, because it will always have, and they decided to call it capitalism. So they call capitalism to reality as it was. What I think this hockey stick development that we saw from the 19th century was not the creation of capitalism, because capitalism was already there. It was the creation of the institutional setting that allowed capitalism to thrive, that allowed for people to have equal rights, that allowed people to save, to have property rights that was essential to be able to save in the long term, to do proper trading, etc. And that, yes, that the creation of that institutional setting with all the liberal revolutions, allowed with all the rights that came from these revolutions, allowed then for this huge development that we have seen. And we must not forget how huge this development was. If we think about how a peasant lived in the 18th, 19th century, it was not very different from a peasant lived 2,000 years before. There were small technological developments, but if we compare that, how a regular person lived in the beginning of the 18th century or in the middle of the 18th century, compared with anyone 2,000 years earlier, there was no big difference. They had to work from day to night to eat. Their children, half of the children would die. They would die before they would turn 40. And if we compare what even the poorest of the people today in developed societies live, there was a huge jump in the quality of life. And that was what that institutional setting, meaning letting capitalism actually work to the good of people, brought to us. And I think that's the biggest change of that we've faced in the last 200 to 300 years.
Okay, understood. So let's deepen our conversation into the topic that we want to understand, which is why capitalism is a moral social system. So Yaron, let me ask you, what is morality from your point of view, and how can we integrate that idea of morality in this debate on capitalist societies and capitalism itself?
Well, I think a moral system or morality is a code of values by which human beings can live their lives that distinguishes between what is pro their lives, what is good for them, and what is bad for them. That is, it is a guide to living life well. It is a guide to human flourishing. And I think one of the things that human beings need in order to live a moral life and to achieve their flourishing, to achieve happiness, to achieve prosperity, is they need freedom. But we need to be careful about the word freedom. Freedom is a word, and I think we'll probably disagree about even what freedom means, right? Because, I mean, you can go in front of any group of people and ask them, do you believe in freedom? And everybody, a group of communists, a group of fascists, everybody will say yes. Because they're all defining it very, very differently. I believe freedom is the absence of coercion, the absence of force, the ability to live your life based on your own values, your own thoughts, your own reasons, your own reason, in pursuit of your own happiness, with nobody inflicting violence and force and coercion and an authority to tell you what you can and cannot do. So I think morally, I reject the idea that we can tax some people because we want to give it to somebody else because they're suffering right now, and these people are doing better than those people, so we should tax them and give it to them. I mean, we used to call that theft, and you know, now we've created state institutions to kind of facilitate that, and it's no longer theft, fine. But the reality is that is immoral. We've taken freedom away from some in order not to enhance the freedom of others, but to make them dependent. So I think it's destructive. I think it's anti-freedom. You're not liberating anybody. So a moral system is that which leaves individuals free of coercion, free of force. It's not a system that facilitates. It's not, freedom is not, it's a positive in terms of it allows people to do stuff. It's not a positive in terms of it gives people or provides them with values.
Okay, so basically, Yaron is kind of stating that what Miguel and Carlos just said about capitalism just a while ago is not really capitalism, but some kind of mixed economy.
Yes, I would define what we have today in the world, and really we've always had to some extent, is a mixture of capitalism and elements of statism, whether you call it socialism or another form of statism. The elements of both, private property, some freedom. Right? You can go to the mall, you can buy pretty much what you want, although you're going to be taxed in between with a VAT or a sales tax. So there's the state force is always there. But it's a mixture of some freedom and a lot of controls. And different countries have different levels of a little bit more freedom, a little bit less freedom, but we have these mixtures, and we usually are debating kind of different little variations, right? A little shift this way, left or right, or however you want to describe it. And what I'm arguing is there is a system called capitalism that's out here. It's an ideal. It purifies it from all the statism. The state is necessary for very few things. You asked before, what should the state do? For exactly what the state is built for. It's there to protect our rights. To do that, you need a military, a police force, and a judiciary. Other than that, you need nothing. It needs to be able to arbitrate issues of individual rights. It needs to protect us from the use of force, from coercion, from people stealing our stuff, taking our stuff, or silencing us, like some people try to do here. That is the role of the state. Other than that, the state has no role. Any other role it takes on is by definition a violation of rights, and therefore a move away from freedom.
Then, Carlos, why then should governments do more than just protect individual and property rights, just like Yaron was mentioning? Why?
I understand that having this internally coherent vision of the world, that any type of taxation is some sort of coercion, and so there shouldn't be any. And that departs from a standpoint that I do not have, which is a fully individualistic standpoint, that there's no values, that we don't have values as a community. And I do believe that we do have some values as a community, and we do have responsibilities towards each other, and they should be assured by taxation, by some level of taxation. Of course, as we were speaking yesterday, there's certain degrees of this. Yesterday we were speaking about on one extreme full capitalism, which I don't like to call it full capitalism, but full individualism, I would say, and on the other extreme full communism, and neither of these has ever been tried. So we ask anyone, has this ever been tried? And no one can give one full example. And Yaron told me, which is true, that it's true that we haven't tried any of these extremes, but the more we get close to one of the extremes, communism, the more misery we create, the more we get closer to the other, the more development we have, and so on, which is true. But there's also probably a reason why we do not get so close to that extreme, and societies tend, even developed societies that provide a lot of well-being to their members, do not get even close to this level, this extreme level. And it's because there is a sense of community. We had the sense that our children cannot go without education, so we need to ensure that. We have the sense that we cannot leave anyone to die of hunger. And yes, it's true. I know that there would be voluntary ways to provide education to children, to provide healthcare. But then we would have another problem, that everyone would wait for everyone else to do that. So we would benefit from this social cohesion. All of us would benefit from it, but then we would wait for anyone else, and that's the reason why we need government to ensure this base level of welfare, to ensure that no children goes without education, that anyone that falls into a severe health problem has some type of support, that no one dies of hunger in elderly age, and I do believe there's a role for that, and yes, we would need some coercion in order to do that, and that does not destroy my belief in capitalism, much less. I think these are pillars that we need for capitalism to work, and to have democratic adhesion to the capitalist values.
Miguel, I presume you kind of agree with Carlos, but tell us if you do. And concerning taxation, tell us, is it moral for a government to collect taxes from the people, of course, to perform some kind of activities in societies, and which ones and why?
Well, let me start by saying why I disagree with Yaron when asked if society needs government besides providing the, the judiciary function, security function, defense function. My short answer would be such a society would not be a free society. And I'll give you a reason. There's many reasons why I say this. Let me just give you an example, just for the sake of argument. Human beings, contrary-wise to the revolutionary liberal motto, are not born free. Every one of us knows that. We are not born free. We are born, every one of us was born in an absolute state of subjection. What is a baby just born, just thrown out in the world? There's no example in the world of nature of such a state of subjection and total dependence than a human being just born. Why is it important? Why does it matter? Because the survival of the human race requires authority, the presence, the existence, the functioning of authority from day one of our individual existence. And that has a whole universe of consequences, even after we are born. So we are not born free, but we are born to freedom. That's a very different thing. So we need to be prepared to be free beings in our own future. So we need authority to guide us. You can call it religion, you can call it parental authority, you can call it whatever you want, but you cannot dispense with authority. That was one of the big mistakes of, the second and third wave of liberalism since the 19th century onwards. Although first generation liberals in the 17th century, they all understood that, but then it was forgotten for many, many reasons. So on top of that, you have to say that freedom, like Yaron was saying, everyone wants freedom. Why is it so? Because freedom has moral value. That's the reason why we think freedom is a good. Even when we say that freedom is that particular good that allows for the fruition of every other remaining good. It's a good. It has a moral value. So if freedom is valued because it has moral value, it's because freedom allows us not to live according to radical contingency. That is to say, we don't value a life that is hostage to arbitrariness. Arbitrariness has no moral value. So we organize ourselves in societies, in full functioning societies that are human communities that in order to be stable need to be organized around the principle of governance, again, the principle of authority. And that implies that freedom is not limitless. This human community needs to be governed. So now we say, well, we want to be free because everyone has the right to do whatever they want. Just to respond to Carlos Guimarães Pinto, one of the reasons that he cannot say that capitalism is just a name that the enemies of capitalism came up with to describe what we were doing as mankind for millennium. And here, Yaron and I are in agreement, of course, that it's an absolute novelty, is for the simple reason that no group of people anywhere in the south, in the north, in the east, in the west of the world, before, say, the 19th century, ever thought that a society could be ruled and lived in which each individual would make up his own mind about what is supremely good for himself. There's no such an example in the past in the history of mankind. It's as simple as that. Either we ask the gods to let us know what it was good, or some priests, or some ruler, or some, old man wiser than we were, we never lived according to this moral notion that we can only agree to what is evil, but we cannot come up to an agreement concerning what is good to every one of us. That is new, and without that moral outlook, there's no capitalism. Capitalism depends on this new moral framework that Yaron can call it freedom. It's a good as name as anyone else, anything else, but it's a different moral outlook, a different moral horizon, and it's new. It's radically new. And it came not from the spontaneous action of human individuals. It came from the mind of a very few number of thinkers, actually, in Europe, in the West, not outside the West, in the West. So it's everything but old, everything but spontaneous. So taxation, is it legitimate? Well, we must agree that of course it is. According to which principle is taxation legitimate? According to the liberal principle of consent. If people consent to being taxed, well, it becomes legitimate. I'm just repeating what liberals have been saying for centuries. Now, taxation with no consent, all right, that is illegitimate, should be disobeyed, should be immoral. But once it's consented to, well, taxation is legitimate. Now, we must ask the question, to what degree should taxation go to? To what kind of objects should state taxation be directed to? Which is more efficient? Which one is less efficient? But that's a different kind of conversation, I would say.
Okay. You want to say something? Yes. Just let me ask you concerning what Miguel just said, and Carlos as well. I cannot resist asking you, and I know you have something else to say, but shouldn't governments provide at least roads, healthcare, education, or if not provide, shouldn't governments pay the private sector to do it?
Yeah, so there's a lot to say, right? So that was pretty dense and a lot of interesting content, some of which I agree, most of which I don't. Let me comment on this idea that we're born dependent, and we certainly are born dependent. There's no question we're completely dependent on the authority of the parent. To extrapolate from our state as children to our state as adults is, I think, a big mistake. We are born without the capacity to reason. We are born without the capacity to think. We're born without the capacity to be rational. We have that potential, and we develop it through childhood. And the whole point of parenting, at the end of the day, is not to inflict some authority on the child, but to guide the child towards independence. That is, to guide the child towards being able to use his own mind in pursuit of his own values, in pursuit of his own life. We guide the child to be an independent human being who can think and take care of himself. And indeed, I think the biggest revolution that makes capitalism possible, if you think about the 18th century, and we talked about the few people that make it possible, and I think it is a few people, maybe the most important person is somebody like Newton, right? Not a political philosopher, but a scientist, who shows us the capacity of reason to understand the world, shows us the efficacy of science, that we no longer have to depend on authority of the past, whether those authorities are religion or whether those authorities are ancient philosophies that philosophers who the scholastics and others took verbatim, right, as the word of God in a sense. But we can think for ourselves. Everybody has the capacity to reason and therefore think for himself, and therefore to be an independent agent. And that doesn't mean to be on a desert island. That means to interact with other people as an independent agent in trading relationships. So the whole point is adulthood is when you don't need authority anymore. You need values. You need a philosophy to guide your life. You need experts to tell you, to diagnose your disease and to help you in a hospital or something like that. You need experts. But you don't need authorities in the sense of somebody who coerces you or somebody who forces their ideas down your throat, or a government that tells you to what you should live for. So I think the idea is that as adults who are capable of reasoning, capable of rationality, capable of discovering their own values, capable of using that reason to discover those values, authority needs to be out. Authority, at least, that can inflict violence if we disagree with it. And government, of course, is such an authority that can inflict violence on us. So,
Yaron, can I interrupt you right there?
Yep.
Well, I just wanted to add something. Well, as you may expect me to say now, is that Yaron made the argument that I was making about authority. You have authority right there. So freedom is not spontaneous. Freedom is created, and it's created by authority. An authority that is there to leave us in a position of guidance once we are endowed with freedom. That's excellent. That was my point precisely. But since he mentioned Newton, and I think Newton is very relevant here, let me just add someone one generation older than Newton, that is, even to my mind, even more important to the creation of the capitalist mentality. Another Englishman, another English scientist, Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon, by himself, created the whole moral outlook of what we call capitalism today. He came up with this thought, very simple thought. Like Carlos was saying, we have, as mankind, experiencing this miserable state of absolute poverty since ever. Since ever. An expectation of living of, 30 years of age, spending your whole day with being hungry, That's the experience of mankind. Bacon thought, for the first time in our history, that it was not supposed to be this way. Yep. But we have the ability to completely transform the world only if we understand that what we have been given, the world that we have been given, is not enough. And we should not be thankful for the poor world that we've been thrown into to get a living. So that's what Bacon is saying. Be demanding. Be demanding about God. God has not given us enough. So it's up to us to completely transform the world and make it plentiful. It's not God that's going to make the world plentiful for us. It's going to be us. But we have to scientifically organize, for the first time in the history of mankind, we have to scientifically organize the way we work. Because spontaneously, we have not been doing things with a purpose of productivity, like we would say today. Productivity was never an objective in the history of mankind, neither in China, neither in ancient Greece, neither in the tribes in Gaul, in Roman Gaul, never. Bacon said, only if we organize ourselves to actually state goals, productivity goals, in science, in our economic life, will we be able to transform the world. And that's exactly what happened. Let me just finish with giving this example. Carlos has been saying, well, we have this institutional setting that allowed us to make capitalism what it was natural and spontaneous, universal. Actually, capitalism depends on one specific institution that was not created by no philosopher or politician, but it's absolutely central, and it's very new. It's the enterprise. It's the company. It never existed before. But once in the 16th century, 17th century, we see these little human communities designed to scientifically work for a purpose, to get more money, to get more products, to get innovation. It never happened before. So actually Bacon is very important here. I'm sorry. Sorry for the interruption.
I completely agree about Bacon. I disagree about the corporation. I think business...
Corporation, yeah, you're right, sorry.
Business ultimately the corporation is ultimately a product of freedom, and the first corporations in the 16th, 17th, 18th century were indeed unfree, right? They were monopolies. A king granted a monopoly, and it's only with the breaking of that in the 19th century under freedom. But the fundamental concept that makes capitalism is not the corporation. It's the precursor for the corporation, and what makes the corporation possible, which is property rights, which of course property rights depend on the concept of individual rights, and that's John Locke. So if we're going to attribute it to a philosopher, John Locke is here crucial because he's defining what property rights are. He's defining what rights are. You can disagree with his definition, but the idea, the fundamental idea, comes from there, and it's only the application of that ultimately leads to the breakup of these monopolies, real property rights, and that is it comes about in the
But he accepted taxation.
in the 19th century.
He accepted taxation. If taxation is consented, then it's legitimate.
Well, but this is the
It's
problem
the
with
central
consent.
tenet of
So let's
his
talk
political
about
philosophy.
consent for a minute. What does consent actually mean, right? Consent means democracy. Consent means we vote a majority. But there's a minority that is not consenting, a minority that voted against a particular proposition. So, as I think the founders of America, and I think many thinkers have discovered, the problem with any kind of democracy is that it oppresses the minority. It's two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner, right? We know how that goes, and we know how it's always going to go. So what about those who don't consent? In every democracy, there are plenty of people who don't consent to be taxed. I don't consent to be taxed, and yet I'm going to be taxed anyway, and I'm going to be coerced. Of course, we consent to all kinds of things that you probably disagree with, that majorities, vote for, that violate our rights. And this is the innovation that is, I think, the American Constitution in its original form and its original intent. And that is the idea that individual rights are beyond voting, are beyond this majoritarian idea of consent. And then the question is, what are those rights? That is, for example, in America, a majority can decide, we don't want to hear Yaron speak anymore. We don't like his ideas, we're going to silence him. And yet, the Constitution protects your right to speak. And if the Constitution better protected your right to property, then a majority maybe couldn't vote to take some of your property away and give it to other people. So I reject the idea that majorities determine consent, because individuals don't consent to everything a majority decides for them. And the smallest minority, always, the smallest minority in any society is the individual. And the individual doesn't consent to most things that the government does today, which is the problem of government today. So many of us don't like what it's doing and yet have no ability to actually change it. So the question was,
What about the roads? That's all very
What about the
interesting,
roads?
I know. But what about the roads, healthcare, education, and the state?
One more point
Can I
before I
just
get
give-
to that.
can I
One-
just make a
one
comment
more
on the
point
question of
because
consent?
Something you said.
Just before you leave the question of consent, can I? Do you mind? Do you mind? There's this very old problem in liberal discussion about the majority principle. So there is this nice guy version of why we accept majority principle, and there's this, rug guy version of why liberals accept the majoritarian principle. So let's begin with the nice guy. The nice guy says that we have to accept decisions by the majority because it's very difficult to get to an unanimous response, of course, about all sorts of issues, so we have to decide anyway. So why the majority? Well, because we accept that we are all politically and morally equal. If we don't accept majority decisions, then we are allowing to give...
But we're rejecting equality.
No,
We're
but
rejecting equality because we're saying those in the majority are more equal
no,
than those in
No,
minority.
We just say that majorities are contingent. This is the nice guy's version.
Yeah.
A majority is contingent. So we have to make up decision. We have to get a decision about taxation or any other issue. So what is the most proper criteria? According to liberal equality, we would say if we don't accept the majority, we are in fact giving a veto to a minority and, in one extreme situation, to a single individual. That would be the most unequal solution we can think of. So this is the most moral version. The less moral version comes from someone that Yaron just quoted, this big, liberal hero called John Locke, this Englishman of the late 17th century. He actually gives a ground for accepting majoritarian decisions, a very different ground. He says it's all a question of force. Of force. So we are adding not votes, but force.
Yeah.
The majority is stronger than the minority. And why does Locke accept such an immoral argument? Because he says that societies have their own inner movement, and that inner movement is given precisely by the stronger party. Now, why are we as liberals, well, I'm actually not a liberal as you may have guessed, but anyway, as liberals in this larger sense, why do we accept that, Yaron doesn't accept this principle, but
No.
the majority of us do, that if you're richer, you should pay more taxes? For one very simple reason. Because if you are already rich, notice this, I'm not taxing you because you are white or because you are black. No, it's because you are richer than the average. So you got more from the society you live in than I did as a poor guy. Let me just give this argument. So we are trading goods. We are trading goods. You got more from us, not because you exploited, but because you live here, right? Try to be rich as Elon Musk living in Burkina Faso. It may be more difficult than living in America. So living in America as a whole, as a society, makes it easier for you to get rich. And you did. You got rich. Now, give it something back to the others who, for arbitrary reasons, didn't got as rich as you and need that money because, we need free schools, or you need free healthcare, or you need social security.
That's a complete perversion of how people, complete perversion of
By the way,
of
this is liberalism
wealth.
as has been written.
No,
It's
I
not
know.
socialism.
I
It's not
disagree with
socialism.
liberalism as
Yeah,
it's been
yeah.
written, obviously. Rich people
socialism.
create the wealth that we all benefit from. They're the massive beneficiaries of mankind. They're not takers, they're givers.
And they're rich.
And they're rich,
And they're rich.
because they've given.
Right, but they're rich,
because,
right? You agree.
Because they've traded.
But you agree that being rich is better than being poor.
Of course.
Right, so
Of
they
course.
get that benefit. They are benefactors to the human race.
But they created that benefit.
Yeah.
It is attributed to them, and everybody else has already benefited from the fact that they become rich. When Steve Jobs becomes rich by producing the iPhone, we all benefit because we get iPhones.
Sure.
And he's become rich.
Sure.
So he doesn't have to give back anything. And if anything, we should say thank you to Steve Jobs above and beyond the billions that he's already made. So it's exactly upside
So
down.
how does
so in
Yeah.
my view, the rich have given so much to all of us.
Right.
They should be taxed less than everybody else. I mean, if you're gonna go based on how much you've contributed, they should be taxed less than everybody else because they've contributed to human life so much more. If you're poor, you haven't contributed anything to the rest of mankind.
Yeah, for no fault
So
of your own. For no fault of your own.
maybe,
But
yes.
that was my point about
we don't
freedom.
know, right? We
But
don't
that's-
know why somebody's poor, but the fact is, to become rich in a free society, you have to produce, you have to do
So
something.
how do you use that argument, a universal argument about taxation on the rich, to those guys who inherit their wealth, who have done nothing for mankind?
Well, all I'm saying, but the people
do you
who
do?
made the money got to choose
Yeah.
what to do with it.
Sure.
They could have burnt it.
Sure.
And they had a right to do that.
But your father is
So-
dead.
so-
Your
so-
father
so-
is
so
dead.
I'm not
You
saying-
are a rich
Sure.
guy. You never did anything for mankind
Sure.
other than putting coke in your nose or
And-
whatever.
And in a capitalist society,
you're not a benefactor to anyone.
I mean, there was a phrase in the
You
19th
have a right to
century.
your property, sure, but
Phrase in the 19th century, from short sleeve to short sleeve in 3 generations. Those who don't make the money, who really live the it's not theirs, lose it very quickly. Yes, okay, so some people are rich because they inherited it, because the person who gave the money has the property right over it. They created it, they get to do whatever they want with it. But most people, at least in the United States, and the more capitalist you become, the more this is true, most people who are rich create that wealth. They're not rich because of an inheritance, they're rich because of their creation. And you can see that, take the Fortune 500 list of the richest people in America, and you will see that an overwhelming majority of that list are people who created the wealth themselves. Just look at the top 10. Most of them are tech entrepreneurs. There are very few families in that top 10. You're quite. Oh, one more thing I want to say before the question. One more thing, because it was brought up about the morality, right? Because this is a discussion about morality. It's not that I believe that freedom is equal to morality. I don't think freedom is a moral concept. I think freedom is a political concept. Morality is about your ability to pursue your own self-interest. It's about the ability to pursue your own rational values. That's what morality is. And what freedom allows is you to be moral. It allows you to go out and pursue those values. It allows you to pursue your self-interest. And so capitalism is a moral system because it gives individuals the freedom to choose their values, to rationally figure out what makes sense for them to go and pursue, and it leaves them free to do so. It leaves them uncoerced, unforced to do exactly that. So that's what makes it moral. Now, why roads and everything else? Look, you know, we could have a whole session on roads, right? But there's zero reason. There's just zero reason why roads, healthcare, education cannot be provided by the private sector. Indeed, much better. I mean, I've driven on the roads here in Lisbon. You know, I come from Puerto Rico, where the roads are even worse than here.
Very much worse.
Much worse than here. I know how good government roads are. I mean, just sit in traffic over there, and you know, in any city in the world, and you see that. I think we could do better. Now, we could have a whole discussion on how government could, how private sector would deal with roads, but that's for another time. Healthcare, God, I mean, you know, we are so retarded in terms of healthcare because it's all bureaucratized and all run by government, and we don't have the you know, market incentives that drive costs down and you know, quality up that we have in every other sector. Why in this so crucial a sector to all of human life do we rely now on socialism to provide us with the goods instead of relying on capitalism? I mean, one can only imagine what a capitalist system applied to healthcare, and don't tell me the United States is capitalist when it comes to healthcare, because it is not. But if only we applied the principle of capitalism to healthcare, wow, we would live so long, we would live such healthy lives, it would all be completely different. And the same with education. I mean, public education, government education sucks. It's really, really bad, at least in the United States. And by the way, the poorer you are, the worse the education you get. That is, the worst education in the United States today is provided in the slums, in the neighborhoods of minorities, where people are really, really poor. That's the worst place, the worst education you can get. Surely entrepreneurs could do better than that. Surely we can figure out a way to improve that. You know, the incentives that the government creates distort the provisioning of any services, whether it's healthcare or whether it's education. So a market-driven education market or healthcare market would surely do a much better job than what we have today.
So, Carlos, what should we do, and after this fiery discussion, what should we do to someone in front of the emergency services at the hospital with no means to pay for their health care? And then to Miguel, another example, what should we do to the kid that can't go to school because of money reasons? But now it's for Carlos, please.
I think the question was answered. First of all, I must admire your restraint of not saying you're all a bunch of socialists and just leaving the room like the
You know, that would be unoriginal.
although I must say that I tend to agree with Mariana Mortágua here. I think she's you don't know who Mariana Mortágua is, but I'll explain you why. No, but it was a really interesting discussion, and to cool down a bit the discussion, I'd like to go some steps back and go back to the nature of capitalism, because I do think it's something that is quite important to understand how capitalism was always part of human nature, and it was described like that. Actually, the word capitalism started being used by anti-capitalists to define the world as it was. And Miguel said something before that I completely disagree. That productivity was never a goal of human being. It was always a goal of human beings. I mean, from the moment that we invented the first tools. Why did we invent the first tools? Because we were worried about productivity, our own productivity. Why did we build the first boats? Because we were worried about, and that was way before the 19th century, way before the 18th century. So this need to trade, to invest, to storage, actually the first cities appeared because human beings were able to start storing food for next winter and so on, and that's why cities came up. The farming itself was a way of investing. So we could be recollectors and go and pick up fruits and spend our days doing like that. At some point, we thought as human beings, well, if we plant some seeds now, so we do an effort that will not lead to us eating right now. We will plant seeds. That this is investment. That's the definition of investment, to do an effort, to do some work, to put some of our work in order to collect something in the future. This is investment, and this is in the nature of human beings. Investing, trading, working, increasing our own productivity was always in the human nature, is part of the human development. We just got a different institutional setting that was based on equality, on opportunities, on property rights. I'm sure that on enterprise, although enterprise was there a bit before, that allowed what was already in the human nature, what was already within us, this need to be more productive, this want to save, this the need for us to be better and to be safer, including economically safer, that allowed it to bring us to the point where we are today. And that's why I said earlier on that I do not believe that capitalism, in the way that it was defined initially by anti-capitalist, by the French philosopher Proudhon, that used to say not that property was theft. He was one of the first philosophers to use the word capitalism because he was strongly anti-capitalist. The way that it was used originally was something that already was in the human beings. And there's one reason I'm a pragmatist, so I'm not as an expert in philosophy as my two colleagues here. I'm a pragmatist, and I look at the world around me and I don't understand it fully. I don't have the capacity to process and storage all the knowledge like no one has. But I look at the reality, and there's probably one reason why there are so many experiences in the world of political organization, and none of those is what Yaron defends. There's probably one reason for that, and the reason for that is probably the same that there was never real communism, is that it would be impossible to actually work. Although I admire the coherence of the thought of the way that you just avoid coercion at all costs, and that's very coherent, but then the reality, the world is made of nuances, and those nuances probably some nuances that we don't understand because we don't have capacity to fully understand. It's the reason why we neither have communism, neither we have the world that you would like us to live in.
So two quick comments. One is I agree with most of what you said in terms of human nature, right? I think we do strive to succeed, to invest, to build, to create, when we're left free. I think one of the reasons, so all of that is true, I just wouldn't call it capitalism. I think that's part of human nature. Okay. Capitalism is when this idea of individual rights is identified, and then institutions are created to protect it.
In that sense,
that's the form.
I think our difference is more about the definition of capitalism than anything else. Yeah.
But I want to integrate this with Francis Bacon, because there is a sense in which Francis Bacon is innovative and new in a sense of progress. But that is in the context of his time and the context of his place, because it is true also that you can convince human beings through ideas and philosophy not to strive, not to improve, not to perfect, and that's why you get dark ages, that's why you get declines in civilization. When you get periods in which people stop making those investments, people stop trading, people stop looking at this world as important, and maybe strive towards another world as their primary rather than improving a lot in this world. And it's important that Francis Bacon comes at a time, right, a renaissance, a rebirth of Western civilization after a period of decline, of lack of investment, of lack of trade, of lack of innovation, and it says, hey, we can indeed progress. We can improve. Knowledge is useful for humankind to improve its lot. So I'll say something even more controversial than what I've said up until now. I really do think that Western civilization was retarded for about 1,000 years because of religion, that de-emphasized this world and emphasized another world, and it needed a Francis Bacon and a bunch of other thinkers to bring this world back into focus so that we could trade, innovate, invest, and do all those things. And there's a reason it's called the Renaissance and then an Enlightenment, because first we had to resurrect kind of Greek ideas that were very focused on this world, and then we had to discover reason, rediscover reason, and apply it to human life, which I think ultimately leads to capitalism.
Just let me go back to Carlos, please. And concerning societies or governments' responsibility on helping others, whether it's about healthcare or education, what kind of thoughts do you have about that? The question was, what should we do? Yeah. What should we do in front when someone is in front of at the hospital with no means to pay for their health care, or if a kid cannot go to school because of money reasons? How should governments and societies act when it comes to the lack of capabilities, money capabilities?
I think government should be.
Oh, Mariana Morgado here.
But I said that I agree with you, right? I said that I was closer to you. You will never forgive me for this one. No, of course I do believe that that government should ensure access to healthcare and education. I said it earlier. I do believe that we are part of a community, and that's also triggering our freedoms. Although it does require some level of coercion at the individual level, it's also a trigger of liberty and freedom to ensure that no one gets into misery or dies because he has no financial means, and that no children is kept without education because their parents wouldn't allow. And there will be. I think we can have a utopic vision of the world in which that would never happen. That under voluntary agreements that would be provided for. And we know that's not the case. We know that wouldn't always be the case. I lived in a very next to me there was an area where people were quite poor, and at that time the state didn't provide it with preschool education, preschool care, and I saw kids of 4 or 5 year old that was just stuck at home for the whole day, that didn't develop language until they were 5, because they didn't get the proper care from their parents, either because they couldn't or because they were alcoholic or whatever. So I do not think we should live in a world where these basic things are not offered, and I think we as the community, and once again, there is a reason why in the developed world, that had this progress in the last 200-300 years, those things are provided for. It's because as a community we agree that there is no example in the world, as there is no example of communism working, there is no example in the developed world where children don't have access to education provided by the state, where elderly people don't have access to healthcare provided by the state. And there's a reason, and you can always say, but elderly people, if they chose not to have an insurance, then they should just take the responsibility for that. Yes, but then you are 70 and you regret, and what can you do? You cannot go back and be 30 again and take different choices in your life. And as a community, it would be extremely hard for us to accept that people would live under those conditions. So yes, we are both Mariana Morgado here, but compared to Yaron, of course. But
so 2 things. One, there's a slippery slope. It's
of
obvious.
There is a slippery slope.
We see it everywhere. And second, the fact that you regret not buying insurance when you're 70, that somehow gives you a right to take my stuff. It does. I mean, and not to come and ask me, not to voluntarily ask people to help you, but it gives you a right, literally, to use coercion against those who were responsible. So the system we have today is one that rewards irresponsibility. It benefits the irresponsible at the expense of the responsible. And it coerces the responsible to take care of the irresponsible. And there's something, morally offensive about that.
Okay, just let me make a brief situation
Daniela,
point.
Daniela, can I?
30 seconds, please.
Well, there's a lot of injustice and suffering and evil in the world. That's why we cannot leave everything to the arbitrariness of our past choices. So I would say that our moral standing is not, well, if you didn't make the right choices before, you cannot coerce me in order to help me helping you now. It's actually the other way around. Because I'm a member of the same community that you are, I will take care, along as everyone else, of you that are suffering, and because you are 3-year-olds and you have an alcoholic parent that hits you.
But nobody's objecting to voluntary help.
No.
I mean, you just said, I want to help.
But that
great.
has
Help them. That's great.
I'm talking about a moral.
But you're talking about coercing people.
I'm talking about a moral political standing that makes sense to a political community, and that has to be translated into a political position and an apparatus, a state apparatus, to make sure that that position is actual policy. Let me just give you. Let me just say something about the naivete that in my opinion, is haunting us while talking about human nature. So there's this idea that we all been as human beings in the past wanting to strive and to prosper. Who doesn't? Look around. Everyone wants to prosper. So people 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago didn't. My answer is yes, they didn't. They did not. Let me give you an example. 2 examples, actually. Why we have 2,500 years of Western literature. There's not one single instance of someone saying that man as man wants to strive, wants to be prosperous, wants to be better tomorrow than he is today, materially speaking. Only beginning in the 17th century, do we start to have people say that. Never before. And in the 17th century, actually, one of these guys, one of these big innovators said the following. You all agree that human beings want to live, right? Not being prosperous, want to live. It's better than being dead, right? Everyone agrees on that. Surely there's no more commonsensical proposition about human nature than this one. We want to live rather than die. Well, actually, this guy was cleverer than we are, because he was saying, well, actually, I know a lot of people who prefer death to being alive. And he gave 2 examples. One, the nobleman, the great warrior. He prefers to die rather than live in shame. Yeah, people actually prefer to die than to live in shame. Not in this room, of course, but in other places and in the past. Second example he gave us, the religious martyr. Yaron, the religious martyr. He rather prefers to die and go to heaven than stay alive and live a life of infidelity to God. Actually, this was the majority of the Western population until 200 years ago, right? But now we don't longer believe in God. We think that our forefathers lived like we lived before. We live now. Wrong. It's just wrong. So this guy called Thomas Hobbes said, it would be excellent if everyone believed that according to human nature, it is better to live than to die. But since human nature is not as constant as that, let us follow the following procedure. Let us make shameful to be a religious martyr. Let us make shameful to be a great noble warrior. Once we have that, once we get rid of the religious martyr, once we get rid of the Achilles, of the great noble warrior, then we can say human nature is all about wanting to live and getting prosperous and better our own condition, like Adam Smith said.
We're actually coming to an end. Do we have time for a last question, Miguel? Do we? Okay, this last question is actually the same for the three of you. Why does not the right, meaning advocates for capitalism, defend a kind of complete laissez-faire capitalism? We can start with Yaron, then Carlos, then Miguel.
Well, I mean, the right is a bunch of socialists. I mean, the right is an interesting term because I mean, there's somewhat arbitrariness in terms of left and right and how we define this. I mean, I like a political spectrum that goes from collectivism to individualism, rather than from left to right, because you know, right and left merge and become one, as you're seeing in the world around us in terms of their statism and in terms of their rejection of capitalism. I think the main reason why people generally reject capitalism is because they have a morality that is inconsistent with capitalism. I mean, we've seen this, right? I mean, there's a real tug at the heartstrings of what about that child? What about that one person that gets left behind? What about those people? Shouldn't it be okay to sacrifice some to others? Sacrifice, after all, is noble. It's good. We live, the conventional morality we all believe in is a morality of sacrifice. Sacrifice is a good thing. Now, I think that is a very slippery slope, and I think that's a morality of socialism. It's not a morality of freedom. It's not a morality of capitalism. I think what's lacking is a real morality of individualism. We start with the individual. We start with the individual living for himself, living a life in pursuit of his own values, using his own reason. And that kind of morality is lacking in the world. And it's, you know, we can have debates about economics that I think are relatively easy. I think I can actually, even these guys who are a little skeptical, I can show them that 100% private healthcare would work 1,000 times better than the healthcare system we have today. Economics is easy. The challenge is morality. The challenge is to get it really philosophical and get down to individual morality, what you should live for. And I think capitalism demands that we change our morality. It means turning upside down the Judeo-Christian ethical code. It means rejecting that and coming up with something new, something that's focused on individual well-being, something that returns to a more Aristotelian view of morality, something about human flourishing as an individual, the individual flourishing. And if we start there, I think then what we realize is coercion and force are the enemy of individual flourishing. Coercion and force are the enemy of individual reason. Coercion and force are the enemies of the pursuit of happiness. And therefore, the one thing we need to extract from society, the one thing we cannot allow in society, is force and coercion. And then, once we get rid of those, all these other details, what happens to kid in front of the emergency room, all of that are details that can be worked out fairly easily. I mean, we've talked about people, we've talked about, people wanting to help. Well, okay, that's voluntary. So help. And if the majority helps and the minority doesn't help, that's fine, because nobody's rights were violated. But if the majority forces the minority to help, now you're using coercion, now you're using force, and now you're moving away from freedom, away from capitalism, and you're actually applying an immoral standard. You're forcing people to do things they don't believe in, because you've decided it's good. It's good to help the child, it's good to help the 70-year-old by your standards. But it's the individual that matters. And so the reason the right and the left and pretty much everybody else doesn't believe in capitalism is because they don't believe in an individualistic moral code, and that's the challenge. That's the struggle.
Carlos?
I think in the way, I think the question there, or an extreme version, it's probably neither right or left, and most people would not believe. But I think the main question is why the right sometimes tends to escape from a free market thought. Why they do not defend more free market than they do? Well, in democracy, it's very hard to do that. It's very hard to win elections by defending free markets or a path towards free markets. That's really complicated. Plus, when there is this struggle between left and right, usually the answer every time we see right emerging, like we've seen right now, is through populist right. So and populism and free markets do not get along very well. Sometimes they do use it as a tool to as an initial tool to differentiate themselves, but once in power, they will never do that. In this extreme version, it's just because it's just not possible. I do believe that this is, as I said before, internally coherent. Yes, to avoid the coercion at all costs. It just doesn't work in reality. It doesn't. It would be impossible to keep a community united, knowing that old people will be without healthcare or unprotected, or children would be. And the reason why I say that it's empirical. It's because it did not exist. It's the same thing that we always ask to communists when we have our debates. Where has it worked? And they always say, well, it has never been tested. This has never been tested, and for a reason. Because it would be impossible to keep a community working under these political premises.
Miguel?
Well, in the past, in the 19th century, there was a political right, pretty much anti-capitalism. But after the Second World War, to a large extent, in the West at least, that political right has been defeated. And it's become marginal in every single country. So we should not be, we should not make complaints about the political right. It's not a binary thing, either complete Stalinism or the unknown ideal. It's, you have a matrix of choices. And actually, I think in the last 60 years, the political right, beginning in Portugal, if it was not for the political right, I mean, the two main political parties before 𝙤𝙤 came along and before Liberal came along, if it were not for PSD and CDS, well, we would be living in a socialist country tout court. So it was due to the PSD mainly that we actually have a free market economy, of course, with a lot of statism, a lot of mixed economy, like every other country in Europe. So, I mean, for me, it's not such a big deal. In the past, yeah, in the 19th century, there was actually a romantic political right that was against capitalism. You have these writings even by Tolstoy, the great Russian novelist. He himself assumes the responsibility that if we have to get rid of trains, yeah, so be it. Thomas Carlyle. Thomas Carlyle was a conservative, a romantic conservative. Perhaps he was even more anti-capitalism than Marx. And Marx learned a lot from Thomas Carlyle. I mean, Marx is welcoming the capitalist revolution. He's welcoming it into the world. He wants to make it strong and fast in order to overcome it, but he's welcoming it. He's not, in the least bit nostalgic about what came before capitalism. Quite the contrary. Actually, Thomas Carlyle was. He said this is all bad news in all fronts. And he came from the right. The German romantics were all anti-capitalism, and they were all defeated. So I think we should be thankful. Let me give you a final word about what Yaron said. That I think is a very serious, really a serious topic, about the relationship between what he calls the culture of individuality, of the morality of individualism on the one hand, and Christianity on the other. I think he has a point there. I mean, we are on different sides of this discussion again, but I think he's right. I mean, Christianity brought into the world this big revolution, the first revolution of love, and it brought to politics and to ethics the very strong idea of compassion for suffering. And I think compassion for suffering coming from Christianity, even though people no longer believe in God, is actually quite strong and explains a lot of our political attitudes today. So I think even though we are on opposite sides on this specific topic, I think he's right. I mean, there's this incompatibility. I think I'm regretting the loss of Christianity in our culture. Maybe he's clapping his hands out, I don't know, but I think it's a very, very serious point here.
Well, I think you're right that Christianity's been secularized, right?
Yeah.
Secular culture has adopted Christianity.
Sure. That's it.
And so the struggle is still between Christian values and capitalism. I don't think they're compatible. And that's why we don't get capitalism, because the values of Christianity are still strong in the culture, even in our secular culture.
I would say thank God.
Yes, I would say the opposite.
Thanks very much. We're now going to open for debate. But before giving the floor to the audience, I think Miguel has something to tell you.
Yes. So thank you once again for being here.
Please clap.
Thank you all so much once again for being here. Before we move to the questions period, let me just tell you that on your seats you're going to find some flyers. You might be wondering what they're for. We are hosting next year in Porto Ayn Rand conference. It's going to be from the 17th to the 19th of April. So that QR code links you, connects you to a website where you can sign up and even apply for a scholarship and attend it for free. So it's going to be 3 days. And if you want to know more about Objectivism and Ayn Rand's ideas, you can apply for it. Please do so. For the ones that are watching online, at the end of this broadcast, you're going to have an image as well with a QR code. You can do the same. If you don't find any flyers on your seats, when you go down on the roll-up, you have the QR code as well, and you can scan the QR code there. Another announcement that I want to make, Miguel Morgado, yes, sorry, because I confused, because they're both Morgado. He won the essay contest, so a big round of applause for him. At the end, just come to the front and I'll deliver the prize to you, okay? So if anyone wants to ask questions, I'm going to ask you to make a line there on that side, and I'll hand you the mic. Please be brief on the introduction of the questions, and just one question per person, okay? Thank you. If anyone wants to ask something? Yeah, there we go.
O gajo aqui entende isto, obrigado.
Line is over there.
Okay. There's a line. Oh, that's the first time.
Hello, my name is Francisco, and my question is, I am currently reading Atlas Shrugged, and there's this notion that a lot of characters talk about how it's basically the fault of the capitalist that they let themselves be labeled as immoral. You know, the very fact that we're having a conversation about morality in capitalism shows us that there is this idea that the two are separate. So even they mentioned the example of Robin Hood, you know, a very old tale in which a thief, which is the good guy, is the guy who steals from a rich. So my question to you is, where does this come from? Do you think it's intrinsic to the human being to almost hate the rich and the owners of companies, or is there an origin to this? Where do you think it comes from?
Well, I mean, I think it is, certainly it's very ancient in the sense that the understanding of economics and how people get rich was based on a zero-sum mentality. That is, for most of human history, people didn't understand the win-win relationship of trade. They didn't understand the value added of production and creation. And indeed, most rich people, if you go to Europe, for example, 500-600 years ago, did not become rich because they produced. They became rich because they stole, right? They were very good at coercion and force. And that's how they got rich. So, and even if you go back to Aristotle and you go to the Greeks, they had very little understanding of the mechanisms of trade and the very essence of win-win. So the idea that the rich are somehow, confiscating their wealth comes from historical experience. And there wasn't a shift, neither in knowledge nor in morality during the 19th century, when suddenly wealth was being created. For the first time in human history, on scale, wealth was being created rather than redistributed, rather than being confiscated. And our knowledge system didn't adapt to the social and economic realities of what was going on.
Just say one thing. I think it's very optimistic to believe that most people already understand that trade is not a win-win situation.
Oh, even today,
Yeah,
I
even
agree with you.
But it's
Even,
easy-
and
but
this is part of the big problem is most people today still see the world as zero sum.
Yeah.
You know, you can see that in American politics right now, very, very, in a really real sense. So this is a real achievement. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward that trade is win-win, but that is a huge cognitive achievement to get to that point.
We
But
face
it's
that
easy-
every day.
It's easier to persuade people that an economic relationship can be a win-win situation when there is economic growth all around. If there isn't, people actually start to make
right.
this rational, conclusion, bring to this rational conclusion that, well, if this is more or less the same wealth year in and year out, if one gets more, then I get less. It makes sense. It all ends with economic growth. That's why there is this very important emancipating moral effect of economic growth as such. Such an important phenomenon.
Good afternoon to the guests and to the panel. I'm Tider Gonçalves, bachelor student for EAP. My question poses to the economic boom that was mentioned in the 19th century, mainly in the second part of the century. My question is, we know that that economic boom consequently gave us political stability in Europe, that consequently gave us broad social come in an era that were of extremists. But when we entered that era, don't you think that the social part, the social development and the social worry about the population that came with economic growth was deterred in the capitalism era? So maybe it was capitalism was a form of economic development, but too extremist to the point that it discards the social part of that era.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what you mean by a social part, but no, I don't think that is true. I think that if you look at societies that approach capitalism, yes, they never reached the ideal, but they approached capitalism during the late part of the 19th century. I don't think the societies there were necessarily unsocial or unhealthy in that sense. This is an era, I mean, let's remember, capitalism did amazing things to mankind, not only economic well-being, but political emancipation. Political emancipation was a feature of capitalism. The abolition of slavery was a feature of capitalism. And I think that once you have a society in which coercion is extracted, not fully, but to a large extent, human relationships become healthier. Because I'm not thinking constantly, is this guy stealing my stuff? Is he part of the majority that's trying to vote me? You know, I think that the more you get a society in which the majority is voting away rights of people constantly, what you get is tribalism and tribal mentality and people fighting each other. So you get social strife. Democracy leads to social strife because you want to form majorities to protect yourself. You want it rather than win-win relationships. Trade is a beautiful thing, and capitalism emphasizes trade. It emphasizes win-win. And I think you get better societies, not worse societies.
Thank you.
He's a member of parliament.
He's also a member of parliament.
A member of parliament.
I mean, yeah, we've got
We
a
have
very
important-
prestigious,
very prestigious guest
very
here.
prestigious audience.
Yeah.
Not as prestigious as Carlos
Oh.
here. So I'm George. Yes, I'm a member of parliament, and I have a question about. You were talking about that pure capitalism or truly unbridled markets have never been tried. Actually, I think there was a very brief period, transition in history, where you were close to that, which was during the 19th century. We were doing away with all the old structures, and you were putting in place all the institutional setup that allowed for capitalism. And for some reason, at the same time, you started seeing more concerns with welfare on the rise as well. People started talking about unions, the rights of children, for instance, the rights of workers. And my intuition is maybe that happened for a reason. Maybe people realized at the time that you couldn't get a stable model if you only had completely free markets without any of the other things. I don't think Bismarck started implementing the welfare state because he was concerned about poor people. I don't think that was his perspective. So I would ask you, do you think you could get that state of pure free markets, you know, the government just doing the minarchist model, without the poor eating the rich? That would be my question. And then a side comment, I don't think, you were always comparing, you know, society under capitalism versus before. I don't think you explored the extent to which moving from a society where wealth came mostly from owning land to a society where you could produce way more and get richer without owning more land, which was a key factor in the transition. Thank you.
But remember, even land ownership was land that was taken by force. I mean, it was defended by force. But look, in my view, history is determined by ideas. Ultimately, ideas shape history. And the reality is that in the 19th century, while the world was moving towards capitalism, there was no intellectual foundations for it. The Enlightenment was dying. As we said, German Romantics, who were the dominant intellectuals in the 19th century, if you look at Kant, Hegel, Schopenhauer, Marx, they dominated. They were anti-capitalist. All of them were anti-capitalist. And so you got a particular momentum out of the Enlightenment that was moving in a particular direction, in direction of capitalism. And at the same time, you got an intellectual backlash against the Enlightenment that elevated socialism or various nationalisms, or the nationalist movement in the 19th century was not pro-capitalist, both on the left and on the right. So there was unanimity across the political spectrum that this phenomenon of capitalism was not good. And some liberals tried to defend it, and I think did a pretty poor job of it. Whether it's Mill or others, I think they sold out on the principles of what is required for capitalism. So look, the battle of ideas was won by the anti-capitalists. And what you got was a compromise. What you got was the mixed economy, which is a compromise between the force of freedom that the Enlightenment set off and the anti-capitalist voices of the 19th century, the philosophers and the intellectuals. And we're still living through that. We're still having this debate. We're still fighting this fight between those different forces. And reality is, how many intellectuals in the world are really pro-capitalism? Very few. How many philosophers out there in the world are pro-capitalism? Very few. So we're still losing.
Why do you think is that?
Because I think that the morality of Christianity is so deeply entrenched in the culture, both in the secular form and in a religious form, that it's going to take a long time to uproot it and to get rid of it and replace it with something better. And until that's done, you will not get laissez-faire capitalism. You will not get a fully capitalist world. Morality is much more difficult to fight over than, as I said, than economics.
Meu nome é André e in English. My name is André, and my question is centered on whether capitalism is the solution for the future of humankind. Because we all know that we wouldn't have enough planets if all of the Earth population had the same consumption style as the United States of America. And since that all of the capitalists want people to consume more and more, how can we create a sustainable future?
I highly recommend reading an economist by the name of Julian Simon, who talked about the ultimate resource. And he shows in his work that there is no limit. There's no limit to resources. Resources are unlimited. Indeed, the only limited resource is the human mind. We are innovative species. There is, think of any resources, and there are substitutes and their products, and we could be mining the asteroids. There's just no limit to how many people can survive, how many people could be on Earth, although the population is shrinking, and how many resources we can get out there. So I think the whole idea of limited resources is false. We could all be living much better than Americans. 8 billion people on planet Earth could be living much better than Americans with the technological knowledge we have today. Never mind the technological knowledge we'll have in 100 years.
Francis Bacon, the guy I was telling you about, in the 16th century said, the Dutch have the best mines in the world, but the Netherlands didn't have any mines. To get iron ore. Not a single mine there was in the Netherlands. So what were the mines? The Dutch themselves.
Yep.
Like I said, that's the ultimate economic resource right there. That's why the Netherlands is the richest country in the world at the end of 16th century, of course.
Absolutely.
So good afternoon. My name is Andre. I'm a student of EAP. I would like to ask Yaron Brook about the. It's not probably about the morality of capitalism that was mentioned here, but it is related. I think it's a relation between psychology and the capitalism. I believe in the idea that the actual mental crisis that we have nowadays in the 21st century is caused by the capitalism in many aspects. Because of capitalism, until the 19th century, I suppose, we have the idea that individuals should work to survive. Nowadays, we have the thesis idea that we live for working, and I think that this idea, in the psychological point of view, it's the main cause of the mental health problems that individuals have nowadays, such as anxiety, depression. So I believe in this aspect. I think the capitalism is the best system that we have in the economical point of view. But I think that in the ethical, philosophical point of view, and I think there's a lot of disadvantages in the aspect that instrumentalizes the individual as a part of a system which the main purpose is just to produce, and doesn't matter the value, doesn't matter in the aspect as values, because capitalism in the moral point of view is just statistics and not values and aspirations. So I think that the crisis, the mental health crisis, I think, I know that you disagree, but what do you think about my idea?
Yaron, take it easy. It's my student, okay? Take it easy. Take it easy. My student. Andre is my student. Take it easy.
So I don't think capitalism is about statistics. I think capitalism is about values. It's about trading values. It's about offering values into the marketplace, and people either value or don't value what you're offering, and they either buy it or don't buy it. They either trade with you or they don't trade with you. That's true in terms of employment. That's true in terms of customers. That's true of all the relationships. Either trade, value for value relationships, or they walk away. I don't think that the psychological crisis that we're living through has anything to do with capitalism. I think it's quite the opposite. I mean, if only we taught people about the virtue of capitalism and how they should live, and the idea that work, you shouldn't live to work. You should live to live. You should work to live. You should work to be happy. You should work to achieve your values. Work is a means, but it's also a psychological means. We gain most of our self-esteem from work. Mm-hmm. Most of our self-esteem comes from work, and it will always be that way. So embrace a career that you love. Embrace something that you are going to enjoy doing, that you value, that then you can achieve things and you can gain pride from, which then leads to increased happiness. I don't think you can be happy in life unless you do work that you enjoy, unless you gain value from your work. It's not about the money. It's about the self-esteem. It's about the achievement of values. So if there are people who live to work, and work is an end in itself somehow for them, then yeah, they're going to have psychological problems, I agree. But that's not the fault of capitalism. That's a fault of, I don't know, the ideas that they're holding, and maybe our educational system, by the way, which is run by the government, not by the free market. It's the fault of our educational system, and it's the fault of the values that our society holds.
So, hello. My name is 𝙏𝙗𝙚, and I'm a rich PhD masochist, so I can pay less taxes.
So you're a rich PhD masochist.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to get it straight.
Yeah, so right. I just can pay less taxes according to you.
I was a poor PhD masochist, but that was
no,
different.
I want to be considered rich, so less taxes. What I would like an answer from each one of you. What would you call a sociological system that liberates the capability of individuals to trade goods?
Go ahead, Carlos.
I wouldn't call it anything. I think it's just human nature. Human beings, as I was saying before, always wanted to do that. Always wanted to trade. It's part of human nature. I know you'll probably call it capitalism, I would guess. And probably according to that definition, yes, it's capitalism, and it has been here for the last 3 centuries. But I do believe that's part of human nature.
Would you call it capitalism, or your?
I made a question. Yeah, I made a question because you were always arguing about the definition, and I couldn't see your guys disagree with this definition.
No.
Oh, all right, I get it.
So
you
I
agree?
think
You agree
capitalism is a system that leaves you free to do that and protects your property rights so that you can engage in that. So yeah, but you need that protection, right? Because if somebody can intervene as you're trading goods and take the stuff away, then you're likely to trade less. You're likely to benefit less. So you need that protection. That's what a system of capitalism, it's a system, right, provides.
But as a system, it also requires this concern with progress. I mean, if we think about it, the way we work and organize production and investment, it's all about making more tomorrow than today. Mm-hmm. If we remove that, we remove the whole capitalist horizon, I think. So there's, we trade with each other. We want to emancipate each other's capabilities, that's for sure. But if we remove this progressive notion that we are ever trying to change the future by what we do in the present, investing, studying, researching and all that, I think we miss a central point about capitalism.
But people always wanted to be better than before. I mean, since
It's
the Bible, I
not true.
mean,
it's
there in the Bible, right?
It's not in the
people
Bible.
wanted to get rich. There were rich people in the Bible. So
yeah, but the Greeks had a specific name for a vice of rich people. It was called pleonexia. Pleonexia was a Greek name for someone who wants to accumulate. Mm-hmm. It was, supposed to be
so there was people who wanted to accumulate.
Yes, but it was negative. Wrong.
It was viewed as a negative.
Exactly. But today's views as negative.
No. There were also people in ancient Greece who actually believed in human sacrifices, and the Greeks said, "No, that's wrong."
Yeah. That's not what they're speaking about.
Yeah, it's the same thing. There were other people who think about, well, I want to make a lot of money until I can't even count my own money.
But still people say today accumulation is wrong. Some people say that still today, right?
But that's what you call the socialists.
I mean, the idea of real progress is a real intellectual achievement. Yeah. And again, in the West, it didn't really exist until Bacon, until the Renaissance. And that's part of what made the West the West.
But
we started to believe that the future is better than...
It's different. Is it a thing that only started to happen recently in the last 2 or 3 centuries because we started having the institutional setting that allowed us to happen?
The mental setting.
Or people did not want that before? Because I don't believe the second version. I don't believe that people did not... Before the institutional setting was there, people did not want to accumulate, did not want progress. I do believe that they wanted. They just didn't have institutional setting that would allow
Carlos Guimarães
for that to happen.
In Europe.
No. If you read the early thinkers from the first 1,000 years AD, right, they are constantly talking about the fact that this world doesn't matter. Progress in this world is insignificant. Now, I'm not saying, individuals out there probably try to make the best. They could, but there was a whole intellectual tradition that advocated for, forget about progress. Progress is impossible, literally impossible.
But we still have thinkers that say that nowadays, and there's a difference between what thinkers were saying and what people were striving for. And that's what I'm trying to say. People were striving before.
Yeah, all right, okay, so...
Then at some point we had institutional settings that allowed us for people to achieve what they were striving for. Their whole... history,
there was Carlos has this idea that the elites were completely blind to what was happening around them. No. That's a possibility. What's wrong with what he's saying is that you have no vestige, you have no evidence of what happened in history.
You have
in
no
Greece,
vestige
in
of
France,
people
in
wanting
England.
to progress and have a
Nothing
better
happened.
life.
Nothing happened.
They didn't
Nothing
leave. They
happened.
didn't leave their village.
Nothing
they
happened.
were subsistence farmers.
You have to give an
They
account of
built
that.
villages. Just the move from being recollectors to establish villages and cities, it showed that they wanted to progress. They wanted to be able to have a better life, and that happened.
Yes,
people
there were
strove for that,
occurrences
right?
in history where people strive for a better life, but there are long stretches of history where nothing happens. Nothing happens, and people are not striving
But
for a
not
variety of
because people
intellectual.
didn't
And
want
you can
to.
see places in the world today where people are quite satisfied with not advancing, not moving,
Sure they
no
are. Sure they
progress, not going anywhere, because, for example, religious martyrdom, often dictates. Look at the Islamic world, often dictates stagnation
You have
and
to
not
go back.
progress.
You have to go back.
And they embrace, an individual embrace that in the name of the religion.
And you have to, I mean, Carlos is saying people want to do better. All right, so if you're saying that I'm being devoured by wild beasts because I live in the woods by myself, and I want to protect myself from the wild beasts, and I get a weapon, and I come up with this way of bringing fire, and that scares the beasts away. Carlos saying, you see, people want to strive. Well, I mean, that's self-protection, of course. But that's
it was
not
more than that. It was way more than that.
That's not what he's here under discussion about development, about economic development, about the transformation of the world, about concepts such as economic growth, concepts such as progress. There was no such thing before, and for thousands and thousands of years. You have to give an account of that.
And
you
this
have
is
to
not-
explain why the change was so dramatic.
I agree
Because
there was no
change could-
economic progress before that, but the strive to have economic progress, the individual strive to was
let me
always
give you
there,
an
was
example.
always part of
For
it.
many years-
Look at the movement today of degrowth. There's a real movement today to stop growing,
Yeah.
to stagnate, which is hard to imagine anything worse than that. There are real people out there who don't want this, who don't want it.
Let me give you this
Exactly,
example.
which doesn't mean that most people still don't want it. They do want it, even though there are some thinkers that want to degrow. Doesn't mean that
But the thinkers are influential, and
that
they
the
have an
human
impact.
nature, the human nature did not change 300 years ago.
No, but
It
what I'm
was
saying
there.
is that 1,000 years ago, the thinkers were degrowth thinkers in a sense. They didn't have a concept of degrowth, but their influence was such that most people just accepted the way of the world was.
so.
They couldn't imagine anything better.
Of course
They
they
just couldn't imagine a future that was better than the past.
People-
because it had always been the same.
People accepted that they were supposed to die, and die early
Young,
rather than late.
This is an amazing
Now,
discussion.
it's actually...
But
let
we
me
have
just say
questions
this.
that-
Let me
sorry,
just say
we got
this.
2 less questions.
Let me say just this. What happened with Bacon again, Descartes also, is that they were starting to make the following reasoning. With the transformation of the world, technologically applying our mental strength to transform the world, we can conquer mortality. And that's what we've been doing so far. I mean, first 30 years old, then 40, then 50, now 90. And perhaps in the next generation, we are able to recompose our bodies and never die. I mean, that's a whole different dream. You didn't have that dream before.
that's a different
And
dream.
you started to have that dream beginning in the 16th and 17th century.
No, I'm just
Sorry for interrupting you guys. I love your guys' banter. I love you how you interact with each other, the clash of personalities and beliefs. My name is Manuel, and I also love how you are organized from left to right to the most radical to the least radical in terms of defense of capitalism. I don't know if it was intentional or not. My question is for you, Yaron Brook, because you said that Christianity and Christian values are incompatible with capitalism. I was going to ask that if that is the case, then why is it that in the US, in the United States, people who tend to be more leftist and anti-capitalist tend to be atheist, leftist, socialists, and people who tend to be more pro-capitalism tend to be right-wing Christian, citizens?
Well, let's be clear that the right-wing Christians in the United States are not pro-capitalism in the sense of what I mean by capitalism. But it's a good question because it's unique to America. It's not clear that Christians elsewhere are pro-free markets as much as Americans are. They tend to be more left-wing. Certainly the Catholic Church has tended to be more left than right, economic terms, with the exception maybe of a pope here or there. I tell my Christian friends in America that many of them, what happens is that they love America, and they love the Constitution, and they love people like Thomas Jefferson and so on. And then what they do is they take their Christian values and they take the Bible and they morph them to adapt to their love of America and their love of the founding. So the primary for them is their patriotism, and then they find what they want, which is, the beauty of I think religious writing is you can find what you want in it, and people can find, of all colors can find it. Americans, those Americans are particularly patriotic and particularly love America, and therefore they find that in the Bible. They find that in the reading of Christianity. I don't think there's anything specific about Christian values that leads to America. The founders of America were not particularly Christian. Many of them were deists. Some of them were unconventional Christians or outside of the mainstream of Christianity. And I don't think the founding documents of America are particularly Christian, in spite of the fact that these conservatives believe they are.
Can I just add something? There's a specifically American story to tell about the flourishing of American Protestantism and the way it developed this affinity for free market economics. And you have the Max Weber story and all that, the Max Weber narrative. But I just wanted to say that in Europe, maybe Christians have learned in the last 60 years or so to appreciate free market economies for the reason that Christians began for the first time to be afraid of the intrusion of states and ideologically driven policies that affects them as Christians.
Yep.
So even the Catholic Church started to develop this great love for the autonomy of civil society as a whole from state intrusion in order for the Catholic Church to survive against the attacks by the atheistic state. And also, the Catholics and Christians have a lot of other institutions, schools or charities and hospitals, that they want to preserve their independence from the state again. So the free market economy gave to Christians a framework, a vision of society that actually not only is more prosperous than socialists and so on and so forth, but also brings protection to them as Christians, because as they have driven into this corner as a minority, they began to be afraid of state intrusion, intermission in their own activities, that I would say.
Yeah.
Okay. My name is João Descalço, and I would like to thank everyone for this great evening. I have a question. It can be for everyone, but in particular to Yaron. First of all, I have to somewhat disagree with the idea that neither Judaism nor Christianity has contributed to the development of capitalism itself, as many Christians and Jews in particular were incredibly, successful in creating many popular and enterprises out there. And I remember watching your podcast on Zuga TV, and you said something really interesting, which has to do with a growing rise of anti-Jew hatred, even in libertarian circles. And my question here is, and considering that this kind of hatred, I tend to see more in collectivist circles, like national socialism, fascism, and even communism, as you could see here from these people that left the room. Do you believe there is a correlation which relates, for example, to the capital sin of Christianity, which is envy, if there is a correlation of this with collectivism and with anti-Jew hatred?
I mean, so let me just say, I've got a couple of talks online on YouTube. If you put in Yaron Brook anti-Semitism, that kind of talk about anti-Semitism and anti-capitalism, and the two are definitely related. Marx was a real anti-Semite. And to see this, the first essay he got published, the first essay Marx published, was called On the Jewish Question, which was a question in Germany at the time about assimilating Jews into society, whether to do it, whether not to do it, and how to do it. And everybody should read this essay because it goes to the heart of what Marx is all about. Marx is not a scientific economist. Marx is a hater. What does he hate? He hates self-interest. He hates individualism. And he associates, and he literally says, the problem with the Jew is he's self-interested. The problem with the Jew is he's capitalist. He's trying to make, and the problem with Christian society is it's become Jewish. He literally says, you know, the Jewish question, the way to solve the Jewish question is for Christians to stop being Jews. Never mind the Jews stop being Jews. Everybody should stop being Jews. So Marx really makes that link between capitalism and the Jew, and condemns the Jew because he manifests self-interest in his behavior. This is his argument. So there's a deep relationship between the left and anti-Semitism, and always has been, and communism, in spite of the fact that some of its intellectuals were Jewish, was very anti-Semitic throughout most of its history. But you know, you said something about Jews and Christians contributing to capitalism. Look, I didn't say there was a conflict between Jews and Christians and capitalism. I said there was a conflict between the ideas of Christianity and Judaism and capitalism, which is not the same thing. Of course, people as individuals, they build businesses, they even contribute ideologically. I mean, John Locke was a Christian. So obviously, people who held beliefs contributed enormously to the creation of a capitalist society. You know, the anti-Semitism is always, and you know, it's a sad way to end this, but kind of the discussion. But it's always a feature of tribalism and collectivism. When it's your tribe against the other tribe, when it really is, when people have a sense that it's existential, they're looking for scapegoats. They're looking for somebody to blame the problems and to lash out at. And that is a feature that develops on the left, and it's a feature that develops on the right. And we're living in the United States right now. It is truly scary as you're seeing anti-Semitism grow on both the left and the right. I mean, there's a big crisis now on the right with Heritage and Tucker Carlson, if you know this stuff. But it is a consequence of this, what's called polarization, with the division of society into tribal mentality, into tribes. And, you know, so we need to form a coalition on the right because everybody's welcome as long as they're anti-left. The unifying factor is the hatred of the left. And of course, much of the left, the unifying factor is hatred of capitalism or hatred of the right, or however they define it. So tribalism is the enemy. Collectivism, in that sense, is the enemy. And in individualistic societies that treat people as individuals, you know, by definition, are not going to be anti-Semitic, are not going to be racist. They're going to treat each person as individual. I mean, I love Martin Luther King's statement about, you know, look at people's character. Not the color of their skin, not their ethnic origin, but who are they? What are their qualities as individuals?
Let the Christian attitude towards inequalities, not to mention other stuff, it's very, very complex. Let me give you an example. So Christianity told the underdogs in society, the poor, the slaves even, because when Christianity emerged, it didn't stand for the abolition of slavery. That was afterwards. So they told the poor and the slave, accept inequality. Accept it. Don't revolt against inequality. You have your masters, you have your rich, accept them. And use your position of inferiority as a sort of training ground for humility. That will bring you the favor of God. That's one goal. The other goal was not Christianity directing itself to the poor and the slaves, but to the rich and the powerful. The church said, I told those subordinate to you that they should accept your position of privilege. But bear in mind that you occupy that position of privilege with no merit of your own. So Christianity delegitimated positions of wealth, of superiority, of social superiority, at the same time that it tried to smooth the potential for envy and revolt among the poorest. That's why Marx then said that, Marx has this very famous line that religion is the opium of the people. And he was thinking mainly about Christianity. But everyone forgets what he says afterwards about religion. He says, well, this is a big insult to religion, right? Because religion is a sort of narcotic. And you forget about the oppression that you are subjected to. You were supposed to be leading the revolution. You're not, because you believe in false gods. But afterwards, Marx says, in the same sentence, that religion is the only heart that is left in a heartless world. So you see how complex Christianity can be, even for the formation of the socialist mentality, as well as for bringing about the capitalist world as we know it today. It's really, really complex, very subtle.
To end on a positive note, just to remind you all that you have those flyers with you. You can scan the QR code and access the link that allows you to sign up or apply for a scholarship and attend for free the conference next year. The ones watching online, now at the end of the broadcast, you'll have an image with that QR code as well. I just want to know that when you're leaving the room, on your right, you're going to have a table with some booklets. Just choose the booklets that interest you the most and take them. They're free to leave, okay? Once again, I want to thank everyone on this panel. Please put your hands together. I also want to thank Lola and SFL, the partners of this event, and the Ayn Rand Institute for being the sponsor. And once again, let's hear it for this panel. Thank you very much for being here.
That's great. That's fantastic.